makes sense. So starting to define those parameters. Let's see, I'm getting a few things in the chat. Let's see what we got. Nice. So we got a couple firms set up, ready to go to the beach. Got somebody in Shelby. Yep, Kings Mount. And then branch out a little bit further. And I think that's a great plan. So kind of start small and see how you're doing and branch out as need be. I mean, I tell you guys, it's a lot. You know, when I got into sales, I said, I can take on the triad. I got this. I got the triad. Y'all, at one point in my career, I had buyers under contract in Whitsett, which is like outside of Burlington. I had sellers under contract in Clemens. I was literally about as far away from each other as you could get. I chose to do that. I chose to take on, but let me tell you about the miles I put on my car going to Whitsett, going to Clemens, going. And that's only a decision for you guys to make. Again, we're not spending our study time on it, but I think it's things to start thinking about, things to start considering, kind of making this a little bit more real. I don't know, commercial. I was fortunate enough, I was kind of the fill-in administration for commercial division until they could find a new person to do it full time. And that's my experience, is behind the scenes. If I had somebody that wanted to buy or sell a commercial property or an industrial warehouse, again, I have two choices. I either learn what I need to know, or I refer them to somebody that already knows it. And I can't tell you what you need to do. Those are things that you guys need to start thinking about, start deciding. So I get very excited when we get to Unit 6, because now we're getting to the broker. We're talking more about our roles and responsibilities. So we're going to get started. If we have nothing else to say, I appreciate you guys in the chat. It's a lot to think about. So we're going to get started on Unit 6. Get a little ways into it. Wherever we leave, after we do Unit 4 math on Tuesday, we'll pick up wherever we leave. And then I got to talk to you about a few more things in just a minute before we go. But let's go ahead and just get started in Unit 6, get introduced to it. And Unit 6 is your land use controls. We may own a property, fee simple absolute, which says I can do anything I want with my property as long as I'm not violating the law. What's the law? Land use controls. So we're going to talk about things like zoning and covenants and rules that we have to follow when we own property. So how we use our land is controlled. The roadmap, the guide. For Unit 6, we're going to talk about public land use controls, and we're going to talk about private land use controls. The difference in the two is how they're enforced. Public land use controls are enforced differently than private, so we'll distinguish between those. We're going to define zoning, and zoning comes with a bunch of terms. I'm not going to get going on the terms today. We're just going to kind of introduce us to zoning. So we're going to spend some time with zoning. And then we're going to talk about our responsibility when it comes to these land use controls. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys right now, a big part of our responsibility in general is to disclose what we know. Real estate agents don't have many secrets. What does it mean to disclose? What are you doing if you're disclosing?
Tell.
Yeah. So when I'm disclosing, I'm telling you what the zoning is. I'm telling you what the covenants are. I'm telling you all this stuff that I am finding. Remember, I'm a fact finder. What good does it do the consumer if I don't disclose to you what I have found, if I don't disclose to you what I know? So let's go ahead and understand that as we get into this broker role. Disclose, disclose, disclose. Once we learn something, I have a duty to disclose. When in doubt, just disclose. Big responsibility. So we're going to talk about our responsibility and disclosure of these land use controls. We'll see all that on Tuesday, next week. So let's talk about zoning. Let's do an introduction to zoning and what this means. Zoning didn't exist until about 1915. Long time ago, huh? And it used to be there was no zoning. There was no reason for zoning. But in the early 1900s, things started growing. And there was an example. They say that zoning started in New York City. Somebody built a skyscraper, no zoning. Somebody built a skyscraper that was 42 stories tall. And when the sun hit that skyscraper, right, it cast a 7-acre shadow over the whole city. There were 7 acres of people that were in the dark. They lost their sunlight because of that building. And because of that, it got New York City and other new growing cities thinking about things like zoning. Do we need to regulate these buildings? Do we need to regulate what's going on with the structures? So today, everybody has zoning. Zoning is local in nature, which means each city, each town, each municipality has their own zoning. And it's all formulated, it's all created with that area's population in mind. Zoning is a public land use control. And with a public land use control, the whole point of public land use controls is to establish these governmental powers. Pete helps us remember those governmental powers. So we have our police powers, escheat, somebody passes without a will, without heirs, that's a governmental power. Taxation is a governmental power, and our eminent domain. So some of these things that we've already talked about. And where we are now is on the police power. Public land use controls, such as zoning, are enforced by the local government. If your neighbor is violating zoning, call the cops so they can decide if it's something that we need to enforce, something that we need to address. Is there a violation? And if so, what happens next? Police powers are just the right to protect the public. And any violation of the police power, any violation of the public land use controls needs to be reported. Public land use controls is enforced by the government. As mentioned, zoning is local in nature, which means all zoning boards are different. Zoning in this city is different than zoning in this city. Zoning in this county is different. They're all different. I'm not trying to memorize all the zonings, but I do need to know where to find it. I do need to know where to access it. I do need to know where to go to look that up. And that's part of these checklists that you guys will get on where and how to go and how to better start understanding what this zoning is. Each zoning authority has what's called a master plan. They have taken their long-term plan and spelled it out. When you guys were in high school, did you ever get the question, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you see yourself? I hated that. I didn't know what I was doing for dinner tonight, not alone where I'm going to be in 5 years. That's kind of what the master plan is asking this local zoning authority. Where do you see yourselves in 20 years? And whether or not we approve it, whether or not we allow it, or if we shut it down, is whether or not it fits in the master plan. If it doesn't fit in the master plan, it probably won't get approved. So that master plan, where we see ourselves in 20 years, what kind of growth do we expect to see? how are we going to achieve that growth? Are we going to offer tax incentives for new businesses to come in? Are we going to offer breaks for developers to come and build? It's not just saying this is where we see ourselves, but it's how do we get there? So this leads us all to zoning. Zoning are laws imposed by the local government. The whole reason they're there is to control how we use our land and how we use our structures. And all of the use has to fit in with the master plan. Zoning has to be flexible, which means zoning should be able to change. As cities grow or die, they need to be able to accommodating to the zoning. Where are my Winston-Salem people? Do I have anybody from Winston? Several of you. Have y'all been downtown lately? Did you go downtown 10, 15 years ago? Things are different downtown now than what they were. And a big reason why we're seeing the growth in downtown Winston-Salem is because they adjusted the zoning to get us where we are today. Winston-Salem people will tell you, RJR, we're big RJR. And there was a ton of these RJR warehouses, plants that were zoned for industrial. RJR shut them down and moved on. And now we got these big buildings sitting empty. That's just wasting space. Nobody's making money off of it. Nobody can use it. So what's one thing they did to fix it? What you're looking at here is Power Plant 64. Apartments that once upon a time ago used to be a warehouse, used to be manufacturing. How can we make them apartments today? Because they have changed the zoning. They were flexible with that zoning. And guys, even if you're not in Winston, you can probably see this a lot in where you live. I'm seeing it in High Point, some of those old furniture industries, furniture mills. And y'all, when they like Power Plant 64, if you get a chance to go check this thing out, it is nice. It is nice living. But they've changed that. They've allowed it to adapt to the current needs of the city. I once heard, I'm trying to think how long ago it was, probably 10 years ago. I don't know, time gets away from me. But I heard the mayor of Winston-Salem about 10, 12 years ago say, 10 years prior to that, you could shoot a cannon down 4th Street after 5 o'clock and not hit a soul. Have you tried to drive down 4th Street lately? You can't drive down it without not hitting somebody. It's tight, it's close. How much they've grown, all because they changed that zoning. And we're seeing the growth. We're seeing you now have a reason to be downtown. You now have a reason. Same thing with High Point. You now have a reason. I moved to High Point in 2000 and they were pushing it. Come downtown, hang out downtown. And my response was always, for what? There was nothing to attract me downtown. You know what? Now they have stuff downtown. You know what I do? I hang out downtown. They gave me a reason, all because of zoning. We said zoning is local in nature. That's because it falls under the North Carolina Enabling Act. The North Carolina Enabling Act says that each zoning board has the power to regulate their own zoning. Raleigh cannot roll up into Winston-Salem and say, this is what your zoning is going to be. Winston-Salem gets to determine Winston-Salem zoning. Raleigh gets zero say-so in that. It is local in nature. You don't have nationwide or statewide ordinances. It is all local in nature. And with zoning, we have some different classifications. So the general classifications, land is zoned for residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural. This gives us the big picture of what is allowed. How can we use the land? What is allowed? All of these come with subclasses. So for example, it may not just say commercial, it may say specific, retail, office space. Residential may say specific, single family, multifamily, how many families can live on that property within this zoning. You also have mixed uses. So back downtown, you're going to have residential and commercial mixed use. It's not uncommon to see the stores, the restaurants on the first floor, and then have apartments, people living above it, second floor up. That's your mixed use. Questions so far on zoning? So this is a good place. Don't go anywhere, but this is a good place to kind of pause for today. Let's talk about what next week is going to look like, back eyeball to eyeball conversation. So when we come in on Tuesday, we're going to do the math of Unit 4. We got to go back and pick that up. Then we're going to pick up, I'm on page 112. So I encourage you guys to look ahead, specifically with some of these zoning terms. So Unit 4 math, and then we're going to finish out Unit 6. After Unit 6, we start Unit 20. I start skipping around in the book. So head bobs, everybody just heard me. Unit 6 and then Unit 20. Please look ahead. After 20, we're going to do Unit 7. I need you guys to look at Unit 7. Unit 7 starts talking about why we're here. Unit 7 starts introducing us to agency, the different types of agency, the different ways I can work with buyers and sellers, landlords and tenants. Unit 7 is when things start getting deep, you guys. We're going to spend like 3 whole classes just in Unit 7. We've blown through 6 units in our first 3 classes together, right? Now we're going to spend 3 classes on a unit. Unit 7, 8, 9, and 10 are heavily tested units. 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's where we're going to be for the next couple weeks. Don't try to worry about 8, 9, and 10 just yet. Just focus this time. You're looking ahead energy on Unit 7. We're going to start seeing a whole bunch of red stars. Because now we're going to get, once we get into 7, we're getting into us. Why I imagine you guys thought you were getting when you signed up for this class. I'm going to teach you guys how to be a real estate agent and the different ways you can act as a real estate agent. Much more exciting than zoning. Yes? Yes, that's why we're here. But we got to get through what we got to get through. So Unit 4 math, 6, 20, and 7. Please look ahead. Get us prepared for next week. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I know you guys are busy. So, shoot me an email, shoot me a text at any time. If I don't get back to you right away, just give me a minute. I promise I will get back to you. But don't ever feel like you're going through this alone. Don't ever feel like you don't have support. Never feel like you're bothering me, because you're not, because this is what I do. So utilize that as a resource. Let me help if you're stuck, especially as we start getting into the deep, deep stuff next week. Yes, I got you. Questions about where we're going next week? Did I do a decent job of explaining the complexity of where we're heading? Did we hear me? I'm seeing head bobs, thumbs ups. Don't look at me next week and say, what? I'm telling you, I'm telling you right now what. It's getting ready to get deep, you guys. These first couple weeks is a cakewalk compared to where we're heading. Everybody good with that? In addition to looking ahead and reviewing where we've been. So now we got to go back. We got to make sure we're good with 2, we're good with 3, we're good with some of 4, we're good with 5, right? This is your study time. This is those 2 to 3 hours outside of class. In addition to that, y'all do something fun this weekend. You guys hurt me when you came in and said, all I did was work and study. That's not fun. Go out and have some fun too. I think it's going to be a nice-ish weekend. At least it's not 100 degrees this weekend, right? So go get you some fresh air, go do something nice, but don't have too much fun. You got to find that balance. Boring. Y'all have a great weekend. Let me know if I can help. We'll see you Tuesday morning with calculators in hand to do Unit 4 math. Thank you. Gotcha. Gotcha.